Hello and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday the 23rd of April 2025, coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy K8ZT.
Hello.
And me, David G7URP. Lovely to see you again. On tonight's show, we look at 100 years of commercial broadcasting in the USA with Anthony K8ZT. We look ahead at two very special events coming up this weekend. And we find out what on earth this is. And frankly, you're such a clever lot that I thought we'd have quite a few entries for this. We've tried, it's not a trick photo. You do have to look at it, I suppose, to get some perspective. But we've only had two entries. And I'm not even going to say they were both right. So if you're looking at that and know what that is or what it's used for, then please put it onto Facebook or BATC now, and then we'll read you that. Read your entry out along with everybody else's in a minute. But first, those special events. It seemed to me when I started organising one of them a couple of months ago or something, and it just seems so far away. But it's not now. It's just a few days away. It's this weekend. First, our traditional K8ZT lifeboat, International Marconi Day. It is from K8ZT Lifeboat Station. Is this Saturday, and using the call GB0CMS. I'm sure you've seen the QSL card before. This is something that Steve G0KY has organised for many years for the club. Very popular event. The K8ZT Lifeboat cuts kindly give us pretty much the run of their whole place to run it from upstairs. So it's very comfortable, very nice. Not saying anything, Steve, but you know, we are doing ours in a tent anyway. So it's a nice, comfortable place. Then there's a tea and coffee and everything else as well, and there's a nice cafe just around the corner as well where you can go and have some lunch or whatever else as well. So it's a nice, comfortable event. Everybody is welcome. Steve still has quite a few operating spots. I messaged him about 15 minutes ago just to see how things were going, and he's still got quite a few there, as you could see. So, but that's not to panic. I'm sure lots of people will be there and want to run those. But if you do want to run a specific slot or a particular mode, you can see there, you can put your name down, and that of course gives you the priority. So this event is on Saturday, 26th of April. What you need to know is that they start setting up from about 8 a.m. So you need to get there if you want to help set up, and they can always do with extra hands to run the cables out and everything. Get there for 8 o'clock if you can. They start transmitting, hopefully operating at about 9 o'clock, and the event goes on till about 4:30. So it's a very nice event. They always make you welcome. And as I'm going to tell you about the second item in a minute, you might think, why have I arranged two special events on the same weekend? Well, it's just because these are commemorative events, and the International Marconi Day is always set on the Saturday closest to Marconi's birthday. That's this Saturday. So that's the event. You can find out more details, as always, on norfolkamateurradio.org. You can also find it on your newsletters, and you can even look at that live roster and add your own details or email Steve to add something if you want to work a particular slot at a particular time. Otherwise, just turn up and have fun. Bring some cake and biscuits. They'd always be appreciated, I think, as well. I'm sorry I can't be there this year, but we've kind of divided because we also wanted to run a special event to commemorate something else. That was very much, as you will see in the next few weeks and months, I guess, the commemorations of World War II 80th anniversary of VE Day is coming up. And this is kind of part of that. The other special event that we're running is on both Saturday and Sunday. So you could do both. You could go to K8ZT on the Saturday and come to us and see the other one on the Sunday. The one that we're running near Dickleborough, near Dis, is Operation Manna and Operation Chowhound, to commemorate those. They were important humanitarian food drops to relieve the famine in Holland behind Nazi lines late in World War II. This year commemorates 80 years since these momentous operations, and several groups of radio amateurs around the world will be marking this with special event stations and awards. And they include stations in Netherlands, Australia, the USA and Canada, and of course the UK. There are two coming from the UK. We, Norfolk Amateur Radio Club, are running GB80CHO, which is the short for Chowhound, from the 100th Bomb Group Memorial Museum at Dickleborough near Diss in Norfolk, and that is this Saturday the 26th and Sunday the 27th of April. And also, I believe there's also one, by the way, in Poland, another station in Poland. You can find out lots of details about that museum by looking at that link on there, but also on our website and on our newsletter you'll also see links to other things, including the special event page that's been set up for all the stations that are commemorating, working all sorts of modes from DMR right through to traditional Morse and all things in between. Now, because of where we're working from, the museum we're working from is only open at weekends, so we can only work and operate on it from the weekends. I think some of the other stations might be operating on the Friday as well. But we're open there on the Saturday and Sunday. We're setting up on the Friday, but we have enough people, frankly, to set the antenna up. And that's all just the outside stuff. We're not setting up any stations or anything on the Friday. Now, we'll be setting up from 9 o'clock in the morning on the Saturday, and then hoping to get on the air by about 10 o'clock. But given that we're working from gazebos, did I mention that they might be a bit colder and wetter than
the
K8ZT? Well, they've got the comfort inside. But anyway, it'll be good fun. We've got our nice club gazebos that we're setting up with 2 stations. We hope to get on the air by about 10 a.m. But have a look at the main website. Details, we didn't want to cover the page here with all of these different websites and things for you to link to. Just go to that, norfolkamateurradio.org, to find out more about this and also about International Marconi Day. We hope you'll support it. And if you can't come and see us, although we'd love to see you. By the way, it's I should tell you that we're setting up at 9. We hope the museum is open between 10 and 4, both Saturday and Sunday.
I think it shuts at 3 on Sunday.
Oh, does it? I thought it was 4. Okay. Well, have a look at their website and you'll find out for sure. Yeah. I think it's 4.
Is it?
But we will be packing up pretty smartly because we can't leave this equipment out overnight. So don't just arrive at 10 to 4 or something, because we will be in the packing up mode then. But we're looking forward to the event, aren't we? It's a really wonderful place to work from as well, as you could see from that aircraft tower. That is actually there now, and there's lots of other things to see and do there. So we hope you'll support us on one of those events. Have a look at the website for more details, or drop me an email or Steve an email if you want to know specific details about them. Now, we haven't got much members news from me this week. In fact, we have only got one little item, and we're going to show you. Tammy's just checking that she's right.
Well, I can't. It's not actually that clear.
I think it is 4. Honestly, I do think it's 4 both days,
but
I think so. I might be wrong. Anyway, have a look at this. This is a picture that Bob G6PWS sent us. He thought we'd appreciate that. We've all had that feeling when we take something in to repair that we've tried to fix ourselves, but we couldn't quite make it. And if you can't quite see it on the screen you're looking at, the caption from the person saying, "Yeah, all right, I admit I had a little go at fixing it myself, but that won't affect the guarantee, will it?"
Nah.
Came with an axe in it, I'm sure. Thank you very much, Bob. It's Derek Nesbitt, by the way, who did that, created the original artwork. So do keep in touch with what you're doing. If you don't send us anything, we can't cover it. You don't want to know just what we're doing. It's boring. It's not
what are we doing? Anything good?
Maybe.
Are we?
Well, according to you, we're doing something special next weekend, but I don't know what it is. So, but we're going to get this weekend done first.
Yeah.
Anyway, so do keep in touch with what you're doing. We love to keep everybody involved with what you're doing, especially now we can all get out and about a bit more. Just send any news at all for the club, any bit of fun or anything like that you want to share, spring pictures and all that sort of thing, to radio@dcpmicro.com. The email's on the bottom of your screens now. Now we return to that competition, and
what about what on earth? About little people.
Oh,
this week.
sorry, little people.
Forgot. You should read your script.
I wrote the script, and I forgot. Sorry, Tammy. Over to you for little people. We'll just cut that bit. We're not live, are we?
No, we're not live. No. Here's little people this week. This is a bit different this week, so I just thought it was pretty cool.
No, we haven't had any tea yet. You know that.
Some oven chips.
Don't show us food when we're hungry.
I just thought that was quite cool, actually. Good imagination.
That is good, actually, isn't it?
Chip stairs.
Yeah. Really, it just shows you how simple something can be as well. Sometimes they're really sophisticated, but this is quite simple. Miniature-calendar.com. New picture every day on this lovely Japanese website, and Tammy picks one out for us. Thanks very much, Tammy. It's good.
Should we go to the competition now?
I'll tell you what. Page 2. See, we do write all this stuff, look. There it is.
We
Little
don't-
people
we don't
at the
read
bottom.
it.
But
We
I
don't
don't
read
read
it,
it.
though.
I'm too busy writing it. So let's have a look and see and remind ourselves what we did with this competition picture when 2 weeks ago tonight we asked you, what on earth is this? See, it's easy when you know, or maybe it's not so easy actually, and only a certain generation would know this, do you think? Do you think a younger person, much younger than us, would know that now, a 20-year-old or 15-year-old?
No, probably
We
not.
must give clues there, must we? Anybody put anything? I don't know.
Yeah,
Anyway,
there is a couple of entries. Hang on, I lost my mouse.
Andrew's got Andrew M0NK says plenty of cake there, but I don't think that's for this.
Oh no, I think that might be for K8ZT.
For Casey, yeah. I hope you're bringing cake to ours as well, Andy. So Andy says something photography or slides, but not sure of the name. Okay, that's M0NKR. Bob G6PWS says, is it a magnifying lens?
Okay, Steve G3EVA, is this week's item a magnifying panel?
And Roy G8IXM says, my guess is this is a frame used for making photographic contact prints.
Everybody's kind of on the right line.
They are the right lines. I know. If we were giving points and prizes, and obviously we won't because that would really worry our treasurer, but if we were, we'd kind of give people a sort of half a point maybe.
Yeah.
Because they're on the right lines. But it is actually...
We took the vital part of clue out of it, didn't we? So
yeah,
we'll
if
show
we'd
it.
have shown you this as well...
So this is it. It's the microfiche carrier, which is the piece that goes on the bottom that you put the slide into.
Now, if you are of a young age and you don't know what we're talking about here, and this looks like it's the Dark Ages, which I suppose it was, this was a way of having storage of lots and lots of documents, all sorts of documents, often used in, if you went into a car dealership, you wanted some spare
this is
parts.
for a car.
Yeah.
It's a Saab 900 on the...
Oh, wow.
On the
I couldn't
thing.
see that.
The suspension.
So if you went
wheels.
into a garage and you wanted to order some spares, instead of storing bookshelves and bookshelves of real books, they could store lots and lots of images on a tiny piece of film like this called a microfiche, or a microfilm sometimes it was called. And you needed a reader to look at it. And this thing that Daniel 2E0JNW gave us was actually the device to hold these slides in position and move it around underneath the reader, the main reader. So
We used to have one where I worked with it.
Did you?
Because we had like appliances like wash machines and things like that. We would have breakdown diagrams of them so we knew which parts to order.
yeah, it saved having all those books, didn't it?
Yeah, and the companies used to give you the microfiche.
Very, very good
Slides.
stuff. I don't know, does anybody use them now?
I don't know, I've not seen one for a long time.
No. Banks used to have them to look at your documents, past statements and things, instead of storing, imagine having to store bank statements.
Yeah.
Anyway, there we are. That's what it was, a microfiche reader carrier. I think half a point to everybody who entered because they were all kind of on the right lines.
Yeah.
Magnifying panel, I mean, how can I say that's completely wrong? Because it wasn't.
No.
It was the right lines. Thank you very much for entering, and thank you, Daniel, for giving us that item as well to show what it was. So let's have a look at something else. See if you know what this is. I'd never seen one of these, or both of these. So we're going to ask you, what on earth is this? It's them, I suppose. What on earth are these? Would be grammatically correct. It's a pair of some tools, I guess you could say that without giving too much of a clue, to do something. But what is it? What are they? What are they used for? You've got just under 2 weeks to let us know. If you can let us know by 3 o'clock on Wednesday week what they are, we will then be able to reveal what they are. I'm just looking to my left because Tammy's looking a bit worried about some technical aspects of it.
That's right, no.
Okay. Anyway, okay, so there we are. That's what it is. What on earth is this? We'll put the pictures as usual on our website, on Facebook, and on the newsletter, and you've got just under 2 weeks to let us know what you think they are or what they're for. So before we meet tonight's guest, let's just have a look at what's coming on the coming week at NARC. On Sunday at 7 o'clock, the GB2RS News on GB3MB repeater. On Monday night at 7:30, also on GB3MB, the Monday Night Net. And then on Wednesday, a week from tonight, we have our meeting at CNS School, 7 to 9:30. It's an in-person meeting, an informal, but Also, as you may have seen from the newsletter this week, if you read that, I've got Stuart M0JKB's all his radios, which Zena wants me to sell on her behalf. So Stuart M0JKB, of course, our dearly missed lead instructor, had quite a collection of radios, as we all do. They were all pretty modern radios, actually, all apart from one, I'd say, were all modern radios. FT450, a 2820, all sorts of radios like that. And for the first time, I'll be taking them to the school next Wednesday. I will do a list of them and put them on our newsletter and our website. So if there's something on that list that interests you, this will be your first opportunity to have a look at them and maybe buy one on that night. So that's what's happening next Wednesday. Apart from that, it will be just a social informal as usual. And of course, as I said, please do send us your news and your updates and any little pictures or anything to make us smile. And also, of course, this card, which we've been sending out for several years now. This has been a slightly updated version. We will send this to anybody who you feel will be cheered by a card from your club. Just email radio@dcpmicro.com for anything for NARC Live or indeed the club, and we'll try and help. So now on to our main event, and tonight's guest is no stranger to us at all. In fact, he's been here for the last few weeks talking to us about, in that case, VHF and UHF, but tonight is something different. So welcome back to Anthony, K8ZT. Hello, Anthony.
Good evening, everyone. Glad to be back.
Good to see you.
We're definitely going to shift gears.
Yeah, this is been a regular shift for you for the last month or last 4 programs. So thank you ever so much for all you've done for us. But tonight's a bit different, isn't it? We thought we'd have a contrast.
Yes, it is very different. And tonight we're not going to talk much about amateur radio, but we're going to talk about the phenomena of radio. And I can promise you there's going to be a lot of homework in today's lesson. So it's something you can share with the whole family. And we'll go ahead and jump in whenever you're ready.
Yeah, all ready for you as usual. To everybody at home now, if you're watching this live on Wednesday the 23rd of April, then this is live and you can ask questions and put them onto BATC or Facebook, and we'll read them to Anthony at the end. But over to you, Anthony.
Thank you. As I mentioned, today's program has a lot of resources in it, so you'll need to be able to get to the slideshow to get to all the links. I have a QR code here, also tiny.cc/RRRADIO, radio with 3 R's, will get you access to this slideshow. I'll also have this available at the end. So we're going to focus a lot on communication today and how radio plays a part in that. And really, communication has developed over the last thousands of years with direct communication via speech, then the idea of communication via writing, then transporting those written messages for other people to read or for people to read at other times, then a variety of early direct communication methods over short distances via different types of signaling, including smoke signals, flags, mirrors, drums, etc. These allowed people that were not within earshot of the speaker to find out a message. Long distance communication came with the arrival of electrical wires and Morse code and the telegraph. Long distance communication via wireless, in other words radio, did not come about until just over 100 years ago. So I do have a timeline here, and as I said, there'll be a lot of homework. When you click on the links, it'll take you out to a resource. You will see the links in this different font. You will also see a link symbol to tell you that it's there. When you click on these links, it'll take you out to a resource somewhere, and this is a very interesting timeline of communication. But basically, speech, we think, started about 100,000 years BCE, so over 102,000 years ago. The first types of written communication involved pictograms, pictures that gave information, the development of hieroglyphics about 3100 BCE, the phonetic alphabet about 1700 BCE. It's almost as soon as we were able to use the written alphabet, people decided they wanted to be able to transport things over distance, and the use of homing pigeons, 1300 BCE, smoke signals, mirrors and lights, Printing press developed around 1400 AD, talking drums 1700 AD. So you notice we're starting to get distance communication here, not real far. There was an optical telegraph, also known as a semaphore, late 1700s. A more developed light and mirror system using telegraphy, 1820s. First photograph, 1827. And then some very important developments in the 1830s, 1838 to 1844, including telecommunications technology from Cook and Whetstone, the electric telegraph with Morse code, and the first fax. Around 1843, the predecessor of fax using electrical printing telegraph. Telephone allowed voice communication for the first time, and that was developed in 1876 with the first practical commercial use of telephone. Radio waves were discovered about 9 years later, but they weren't put into use for a few years, and we'll look through some of that history on the upcoming slides. But first, let's talk a little bit about radio's role in human technology. Radio fundamentally altered the world by revolutionizing communication and shaping mass culture. It provided a new way to transmit information instantly over vast distances, fostering national conversations and bringing people together. It was a way to communicate with multiple people instantaneously, with distance not being a factor. It also significantly influenced entertainment, news, advertising, and it became a primary source of information and entertainment for many people. Radio's development spurred advances in electronics and telecommunications in general. It paved the way for further technological innovations and ultimately television. Not only speech, but also a video signal. Radio fostered a sense of national unity and community, especially during challenging times like the Depression and World War II, when radio was often referred to as in its golden days. It enabled people to hear news and events from around the world instantaneously, fostering a sense of global citizenship. Even today, radio remains a relevant source of local news, weather updates, emergency broadcasts, supporting local events, charitable causes. But unfortunately, that is not what most of the public, especially youth, think of radio. Radio? No one uses that anymore. Here's some examples of what people think of radios that are no longer in use, and some of these particular models are no longer in use. Here's some a little bit later ones that I remember fondly from my youth, but this is something that most people don't think about today. But they do think about this device, and this uses radio also. And some more devices. And some other types of uses of radio using data. Remote control operation, Bluetooth technology, satellite communication. Here's a military operations. You can notice 7 radio devices on these 2 soldiers. Radio is used for a lot of industrial uses, control of robots, control of drones, GPS, etc. Our GPS system relies on satellites and radio signals. That allows us to do navigation using our phones or GPS in our vehicles. Behind the other technologies and names, radio is silently playing a role in remote control devices, data transfer, internet, and industrial uses throughout our lives. We just don't call it radio anymore in a lot of cases. Ultimately, radio has revolutionized the earlier invention of wired telephony into today's wireless, constantly connected personal devices known as mobile or cellular telephones, tablets, computers, GPSs, etc. So we're using radio all the time, but we don't often refer to it as radio. So that's what's happened with radio in general, but let's go back over 100 years ago and let's look at some of the pioneers of radio technology. James Clerk Maxwell, a mathematician who developed the theory of electromagnetism, he never actually experienced radio waves, but he predicted the existence of them and their propagation through air in 1861 through 1873 in a number of papers. Heinrich Hertz in 1886 became the first person to transmit and receive controlled radio waves. And as I said before, there's a lot of links in here, including a lot of videos. I'm not going to play all the videos today. You can play the videos on your own, but I'll start this one to give you an example of what's there.
Electromagnetic waves. The great scientist Heinrich Hertz was the first man to transmit and detect electromagnetic waves. In his famous experiment, a high-voltage current was applied to the two ends of two metal wires, which generated a spark in the gap between them. This spark resulted in the radiation of electromagnetic waves. Those electromagnetic waves traveled through the air and created a spark in a metal coil located over a meter away. If you had placed an LED in that gap, the bulb would have glowed. This was a clear case of electromagnetic wave propagation and detection. However,
I'll let you watch the rest of the video later. Marconi, the Italian inventor who will be celebrating this upcoming weekend, proved that the electromagnetic energy could be put into a practical use. He wasn't so much involved in the scientific developments in radio, but in the practical use of the technology that other people devised. The transmission of information using radio waves. It was demonstrated that it was possible to manipulate the waves to send telegraphic messages using Morse code system of dots and dashes by interrupting the waves in a manner similar to the on-off configuration in wired telegraphy. Here's a video on Marconi. I'll let you watch at your leisure. And again, I have to remember to move my mouse quickly so we don't stop on the videos. Our next pioneer of radio that we want to introduce is Ambrose Fleming. He's the inventor of the two-electrode radio rectifier, also known as the thermodynamic valve. These valves that Fleming developed, there was a number of different ones, including the vacuum diode. Some of these were patented in the early 1900s, and they were great ways to convert radio signals into direct electrical currents and vice versa. There's a video on Ambrose Fleming that you can watch coming up. Reginald Fresden, a Canadian, he teamed up with General Electric engineer F.W. Alexanderson to develop an alternator that produced a continuous wave that could transmit sound. It's the principle behind the concept of amplitude modulation. His development achievements were well ahead of their time, showing insight not only into the technical aspects of radio, but he was one of the people that also started to think about developing the commercial elements of radio. Some of his achievements were noted as the first audio and voice and music radio transmissions in 1900 and in 1906. 1906, on Christmas Eve, he was said to have broadcast a program of entertainment for the holiday. Now, some of these facts of these events are in question, and we may never know for sure whether he actually did it, but he is noted for the transmission of sound wirelessly, amplitude modulation, the Alexander alternator, one-way valve, and his goal was not radio broadcasting as much as wireless telephone. There's video on him that you'll be able to watch, but there's also another video here in a link on his supposed Christmas Eve 1906 broadcast. They did a reconstruction of it. There's a National Public Radio story here, and you can also watch or listen to a short simulation. So we'll listen to a little bit of that.
Calling CQ to all ships. This is station BO, Bravo Ocean at Brant Rock. Listen, you are about to hear a special transmission for Christmas Eve.
As a sidebar, there's a whole article here on the use of radio on Christmas. So you can take a look at this link and get more information on the history of radio and the Christmas holiday. Our next pioneer of radio was Lee DeForest. He's credited with the invention of the Audion tube based on Fleming's earlier work. We call them vacuum tubes here. I know they're referred to as valves there, and that's a little more fitting with the original descriptions by the inventors. This was a device used to amplify weak radio signals. This allowed the replacement of the earlier coherer which was used in detection in the receivers. This was much, much more effective. And this work, along with Fredenson's, actually allowed the beginning of use of speech and other audio reception in addition to the dits and dahs of Morse code. So we were moving away from the radio telegraph into radio as not only dits and dahs, but actually speech and music. Here's another video on the forest. Our next pioneer of radio is Edwin Howard Armstrong. He was one of DeForest's major rivals, and unfortunately they fought back and forth in the courts for a number of years. Major Armstrong, as he was known, is also called the father of FM. He invented the regenerative circuit and the superheterodyne circuit, which vastly improved radio. He also offered a series of experimental broadcasts. So this is one of the first one-way broadcasts that were designed for the public to pick them up. It was Armstrong's idea to begin using a speaker to listen to radio in place of the early use of headphones. David Sarnoff, another pioneer of radio, saw radio as a curious experiment. But in 1915, he began to identify radio's commercial potential, the possibility of radio music boxes in every home. He saw radio as an appliance, little more than a talking furniture, as he said. The main revenue will be derived from the sale of the radio music boxes, not the radio service itself, which eventually was the main profit. So here's a video on the superheterodyne receiver, also talks about Sarnoff and Edward Howard Armstrong. So some of the earliest uses of radio, before we get into broadcasting, it was a replacement for wire-based telegraphy. That was the main goal of many of the early pioneers. The use of dots and dashes in Morse code allowed operators to send letters and words via radio around the world without wires. The early technology could not handle more complex audio such as speech or music well. As technology grew, it became possible to easily and effectively send voice and music, and we think more of radio as the transmission of voice and music. So let's look at some of the early uses of radio before 1920 and the broadcast industry. Radio was used especially when it was impractical to string wires to send telegraphy. If you could string wires, it was much easier to stick with the wired telegraph. But when you could not string wires, such as between ships or between ships and land, radio became the king of communication. Across oceans, from airplanes to the ground, were all impractical to use wired systems, so radio was quickly adopted for these uses. The second use was experimenters and scientists. There was a lot of people experimenting with radio waves and radio energy. The third use was most early companies were interested in the commercial use of radio to replace private telegraph messaging, not broadcasting, but one-to-one transmission of messages for hire. The fourth group were tinkerers, today known as makers or hackers, and they were known as amateur radio operators. By the 1910s, there were thousands of amateurs on the air across the world. In 1917, however, the advent of World War I brought an end to what had become an amateur radio until after the war, when operators could resume on-the-air activities. This is a picture of an amateur radio station circa 1920. Now, before 1920, another great use of radio was an interest in using it in wartime. For doing command communication, for getting information behind the lines, etc., etc. The first military use was by the Japanese Navy in the Soviet-Japanese War in 1905. During World War I in the U.S., the Navy was put in charge of regulating radio usage. Following the war, the public became entranced with the idea of hearing people through the ether. And there's an extremely interesting story here from Radio Lab, WNNC, NYC, that talks about the relationship of the flu of 1918 and the number of people that died, the use of mediums, and the whole idea that you could communicate possibly even with the dead using radio. There's also a very interesting article here that you can read on the secret life of radio, fringe practices of a mass medium. And there's a video here that you can listen to the dispatches from 1918.
Where would you like to launch in?
Let's start in the fall of 1919. The war is over, the flu is winding down, and we're in Pittsburgh with this guy,
Frank Conrad, who had been a ham operator before the war, and once the war ends, in his garage, he, sets up resets up his amateur station.
So that's Susan Douglas, radio historian.
And I am a professor of communication and media at the University of Michigan.
And back then, radio broadcasts were really just Morse code, just a bunch of beeps and boops. But Frank was about to change that.
He worked for Westinghouse, which was an electrical manufacturing company. So he thus had access to vacuum tubes that were used for transmission.
And all you need to know about vacuum tubes is that they were the secret bit of technology that let radio go from this to this thing that's full of life. But also, in that moment in history, in the wake of the flu, weirdly made us confront death.
Absolutely.
So on October 17th, 1919, Frank is in his garage with these fancy vacuum tubes. And then he picks up a microphone.
Pushed up to a phonograph.
And music floated out of Frank's little garage into the air. There's no recording of this broadcast. All we know is that Frank talked a little, played some music, and about 35 miles away, all the way across Pittsburgh, those sounds reached the ears of a little boy named Harry Mills.
I remember.
And I'll let you watch the rest of the video on your own. Sorry for the interruption there. The page is still loading. So, November 2nd, 1920, KDKA, the call sign of course wasn't there at that time, in Pittsburgh came on the air. It holds the much disputed title of the first commercial broadcast station on the air. And you can read the more information on both of these. There's a lot of people that claim they were the first commercial radio station, but in the U.S., KDKA is recognized as one of the first, if not the first. So basically 125 years ago, this fall. Here's a short audio message on that.
65 years ago, it was mostly a dream. Today, broadcasting is such an important part of our way of life, it is hard to imagine life without it. The world's first scheduled broadcast was made from Westinghouse's KDKA, Pittsburgh, the pioneer broadcasting station of the world.
November 2nd, 1985. November 2nd, 1970. November 2nd, 1960. November 2nd, 1950. November 2nd, 1940. November 2nd, 1930.
The time, November 2nd, 1920. The place, an industrial area of East Pittsburgh. Rain is falling gently in the darkness. Just ahead, two young men are walking quickly toward one of the entrances of a large factory building. They enter and hurry up the long stairway to join three others in a tiny makeshift shack on the roof. A shack filled with electrical equipment. Each takes their place in the room. William Thomas is at a large panel of switches. R.S. McClelland and John Frazier sit at telephones. Chief Engineer Little stands by. And seated in front of a small box is Leo H. Rosenberg. William Thomas checks his pocket watch, nods, and throws a switch. And Leo Rosenberg begins the world's first scheduled broadcast.
This is KDKA,
of the Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company in East Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
But did Leo Rosenberg realize he was making history?
Everybody asked me that, and we had no idea because there never had been any broadcasting. As a matter of fact, there was no such word as broadcast at that time. What we did was to send out the electric return.
But the man responsible for the Westinghouse engineering triumph wasn't present at that first broadcast. Dr. Frank Conrad, assistant chief engineer of Westinghouse, was standing by at his experimental radio station, 8XK, 5 miles away in Wilkinsburg, in case the East Pittsburgh equipment failed. It was on this original transmitter that Dr. Conrad had first experimented 4 years earlier. Conrad's wife recalls.
A few wires
and I'll let you listen to the rest of it. But a couple of key facts if you didn't notice it. The first transmission was on November 2nd. It was the U.S. election day, and the first transmission included the results of that election. From the beginning of broadcast radio, different countries took one of two paths or mixture of both with the idea of commercial broadcast. Commercially sponsored radio stations, public or government-sponsored radio stations, or in some cases a mix of commercial and public government or government sponsored. The U.S. for most stations went the commercial sponsor route. A wide variety of business and organizations jumped into radio as a way to bolster their industries or causes. Early U.S. broadcast radio owners included radio and technology companies, Westinghouse, GE, RCA, AT&T, news organizations, especially newspapers and magazines, non-technical businesses such as insurance and financial companies, music and entertainment groups, general merchandisers selling everything from elixirs to remedies to everyday goods such as shoes, etc. Educational institutions were very big in jumping in. A lot of colleges, even high schools, developed commercial broadcast stations. Advocacy organizations developed radio stations as a way of getting out their word to the general public. Religious groups, both organized mainline churches and independent ministers, were quick to jump on the radio bandwagon. Fraternal groups had stations also. This is a listing, I know it's kind of hard to read, but this is a listing of the first 100 U.S. broadcast stations, starting with KDKA back in October of 1920, and going up. I'll just read quickly some of the owners: Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing, DeForest Telephone and Telegraph, the Detroit News, White and Boyer Company, Northern Radio and Electric Company, Edwin Loudon, Atlantic Pacific Radio Supplies, the Radio Telephone Shop, Ship Owners Radio Service, the Church of the Covenant, DC Radio Construction Electrical, and so forth and so forth. The Newspaper Printing Company, the University of Minnesota, the University of Wisconsin, the Wireless Telephone Hudson County, New Jersey, the Marshall Gurnick Company, Montgomery Light and Water Power Company, etc., etc. So you can see that there was a number of people getting involved in radio. Here's two great documentaries on old-time radio. It's called The First 50 Years of Radio Broadcasting. Again, I'll let you listen and to watch both of these on your own. Now, we're going to go through a number of different links here as we go through different eras of early broadcasting. We start off with something from the broadcast archives. Broadcast talks about these early broadcasts. A lot of them are recreations because some of them were not many of them were not recorded, so some of these are recreations of shows based on scripts. And a lot of these talk about different aspects of the first radio stations. Again, all of these are links for you to explore on your own. The National Museum of Broadcasting, something you think would be there, has been proposed but never developed. There's a group that would like to have that site in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where Frank Conrad had his station turned into a museum, but it's never actually been done. Early broadcasting in the 1920s. Let's watch a little bit of this video.
Radio station. was made by KDKA, a station in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. KDKA took to the airwaves for the first time on November 2nd, 1920, reporting the results of the 1920 presidential election. Radio sales were estimated at $60 million a year, and there were already more than 500 radio stations across the country. Very few other technologies have been adopted by the public as quickly as radio. Radios came in all shapes and sizes, too. The smallest and least expensive could be purchased for as little as $8. The most expensive units were well over $300. That would be more than $4,000 in today's currency. As radio became more commonplace, programming became more diversified. Before long, news broadcasts, weather reports, popular music, classical music, opera, sports, and fictional programming could all be found. Fictional radio programs became the most popular, especially in the latter part of the 1920s and into the 1930s. Similar to today's television programming, a variety of different genres appealed to a wide array of taste. Westerns, mysteries, comedies, romance, and children's shows were all popular. Radio drastically changed American home life. Families would come home in the evening and gather around the radio to listen to the latest news and their favorite radio programs. Very similar to how families might watch television today. Some would even have radio parties, inviting over friends or families who might not have a radio yet. For the first time, a national culture began to develop. Listeners across the nation were enjoying the same music and laughing to the same comedy sketches. Baseball fans in Kentucky could listen to a game being played in Boston, while teenagers in Texas might be listening to the latest jazz music from the Cotton Club in New York City. At first, the federal government had very little regulation over the radio industry. As radio became more and more popular, the government eventually stepped in and began passing laws to monitor content and regulate other aspects of the industry. The Federal Radio Act of 1927 authorized the creation of the Federal Radio Commission, which oversaw radio. Not everyone was a fan of radio, though. Many derided the new technology as a mere toy. Others described it as virtually useless and saw no practical application for the device. The harshest critics suggested that it would cause a moral corruption of society as Americans became lazy and desired only more entertainment. Still others felt that it made the dissemination of information too easy, and thus people would not value it as much. However, despite these criticisms, one thing was clear to all. For better or worse, radio had arrived, and it was here to stay.
It was very interesting talking about sharing the radio. My grandmother had one of the first radios in their town. They put it in a window that was directly in front of their porch so the neighbors could come and gather on the porch and listen to the radio outside the window without having to come into the house. So, just as many technologies have developed over the years, we always hear that blank is going to be the death of. We went through this a number of times with the internet recently, with people saying it's going to be the death of all these different things going on, and people were saying the same thing about radio. I have another video. I'm not going to play these individual ones, but this is radio in the 1930s. Very, very much tied in with the depression that took place around the world in the 1930s. Radio became one of the things that people could do inexpensively. Cars and radio were a big thing, and I have a couple resources here on a brief history of the car radio and the history of the car radio. And notice I have a diagram here from 1930 showing how to install a radio in a Motorola radio in a car. And you have some examples of early radios, including a little bit later one here from the 1960s or 70s that included an 8-track player. The golden age of radio, the 30s and the 40s, really brought a wide variety of entertainment to radio. And I'll let you go through these. A lot of these have recreations and some have recordings of some of the radio shows. Some antique radio information, including antique radio museums and material from antique radios. And radios, as a phenomena, generated a lot of other things. There was a whole group of magazines that were devoted to the building and use of radios, the radio entertainment world, and you can go back through these archives and they're really good information on the times incorporated into radio technology. Radio commercials from the 1950s and 1960s, I'll need to fix this, but they're very hilarious to listen to. There's a great series that was played on public broadcasting in the United States called The Emperor of the Air and The Men Who Made Radio. You can watch the video and the movie, and you can also find out more about it. There's also a very good YouTube presentation called The Secret Life of Radio Remastered, and that is also available, and it's a very good video to watch. I'm not going to play the whole thing right now, but it is about half an hour long. Radio has been represented in many things, and one of the interesting things is a lot of the songs that were played on the radio talked about radio. So I have here 55 of the best songs about radio. Wikipedia's songs about radio with 100 selections. Category of songs about radio. 9 songs that have hidden Morse code and songs with Morse code. You can go to all of these and find out more and listen to those material. Now, I'm not going to be able to play the next couple of videos because if we do, this will get bounced off of YouTube pretty quick because we'll be violating a bunch of copyrights. But Rush's The Spirit of Radio, the Beach Boys, That's Why God Made the Radio, Joni Mitchell's You Turn Me On, I'm a Radio, are all different popular songs. Roger Waters, Radio Waves, Joe Walsh, who also is an amateur radio operator, has the radio song video. Queen has their Radio Gaga. You Turn Me On, You're a Radio. ABBA's SOS. Zach Top's Country Music Sounds Like a Radio. The Bungles, Video Killed the Radio Star. Steely Dan's FM, No Static at All. And Slim Gilliard's Communication, that is a song that he sings doing das and dats like Morse code. Radio was also in the spirit of books and movies. I have books here, literature that includes radio as part of the plot. Movies about radio, and movies every radio lover needs to watch. So you can have a lot of material here. Some other radio resources. A recent video, YouTube by James Wade, WB8SIW. He's an amateur radio operator and an amateur historian. He has an early history of radio that is very good. He goes into more technical details than I did today, which I think you'll enjoy. And DLARC is known as the online amateur radio library. It's devoted to ham radio, shortwave listening, college radio, and early communications, and it's part of the radio archives. Now, I have a short section on amateur radio operating, and I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but hopefully you'll share this with your friends who are not amateur radio operators, and I have a link in here that basically talks about what is amateur radio. So for someone who doesn't know what amateur radio is, they can go in here and see this link with information on what is amateur radio, and they can go through that whole slideshow. I also have some resources for youngsters, including the Kids Radio Zone and the Teachers Radio Zone and Ham Radio Youth Resources. And that ends our slideshow. Again, this is the link, tiny.cc/RRRadio, to get you all the slides and all the resources that you're going to need to go through. If you need a PDF copy, you can also click here and get that. And also, my contact information, K8ZT73@gmail.com, and my website, K8ZT.com. Also, my link to all of my presentations that I've done over the last 5 years, on a wide variety of amateur radio topics. You can go there and get a complete link. So again, I'll leave this up for a few seconds with the link and the QR code to get the entire slideshow, and I'll turn it back to you, David.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Covered a heck of a lot there. Amazing how, I guess a lot of us will certainly take radio for granted in that it's been invented and we use it and we know how it works, most of us, and we experiment and do things. But I don't know about you, and I don't know about you at home as well. I worry that there'll be a generation coming, maybe not that far from now, where they don't even question it. It's just there. Wi-Fi is everywhere almost. And, so I think it's really good to look back at those days. And thank you very much for giving us this talk. I must, as by the way, mention at this point as well, if you've been watching this at home and you've got any comments or questions or anything for Anthony, or you just want to share things, then please do pop them onto the chats now. There's something that we can, it did raise my interest a lot, piqued my interest really, Anthony, when you showed that Secret Life of Machines, because not only is that a British program or series of programs that was around on Channel 4 many years ago, but is run by a guy called Tim Hunkin, and he is from our part of the country. And not only that, and some of you may not know this, but he came and officially opened our Radio Shack at the school where we meet about 10 years ago, I'd say, something like that. So he was a real favourite, and recently he's produced some new programs as well about how things work, and I think the original ones have been remastered as well, so maybe your link is to one of those.
Yes, it is. It is to the remastered original.
Yeah, so it's great. A wonderful chap. He lives in Suffolk, which is the next county from Norfolk where we are tonight. So yeah, very, very nice chap, and very good. Thank you very much for all of that. I don't know if we have any comments or anything from anybody yet. So Richard M6 UES says, a really impressive collection of links which we can watch offline at our leisure. I've downloaded and we'll have a good look later. Thanks very much for putting them together, Anthony. And Ralph 2M0RHT is our Scottish correspondent, as we call him. He said, this is impressive as well. Talk about name drop. This is even more impressive. He said, I was at James Clerk Maxwell's house 10 days ago with the James Clerk Maxwell Radio Society. That's pretty good, isn't it?
That's great. That is great. And I'm sorry I didn't spend time and give you a history of the UK end of things. I know it's a little bit different, but I didn't do that for this particular one. I didn't feel that qualified to do that. But again, we went the commercial route of having salesmen handling the idea of broadcasting, where you guys went the government route, and they're both still surviving, and they're both still doing fairly well. I listen to the BBC all the time here via internet radio. One of the most interesting things when I work with youth a lot of times is I bring radios and have them tune radios or have them tune online software-defined radios. They don't understand the concept of tuning.
Really?
That just seems so foreign to them, because they're used to just saying what they want to hear or searching. So they understand searching for programming. They understand asking for program through a voice search, but they don't understand the concept of having to tune around to find something. So it's always fun when I'm working with youngsters and I give them a radio to tune. Most of the time it's an online software-defined radio, and I have a whole presentation on that. It's at tiny.cc/freerx, F-R-E-E-R-X. So tiny.cc/freerx, and that gives you information on using online tunable radios around the world to tune in amateur radio. But there's also a section in that same presentation on using something called Radio Garden, which is an online service that lets you spin the globe around and tune in stations, commercial stations around the world. And that is also very fun to use. So again, I'll put that link up on the screen here for that particular program. It's tiny.cc/freerx.
Okay,
and you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that looks like this. And you will get a document that l
Oh, yeah.
Did a little bit too much there. Let me zoom out just a little bit. So you can shoot this QR code. I'll have that, or go to tiny.cc FreeRx, and it goes through web SDRs, Kiwis, and the open web. These are all hundreds of amateur radio receivers around the world. When I was a youngster and I wanted to listen to amateur radio or commercial shortwave, I needed to build a shortwave radio, string up an antenna. This allows you to give a youngster or anyone a very good receiver someplace anywhere in the world they choose with a very good antenna and tune these in. But there's also information here on how they work and more information. Down here are some other additional tuners. Here's the World Radio Garden I talked about earlier. This particular one, when you go out to it, you'll see that you get a globe and it will play stations around the world. You can zoom in and zoom out. You can spin the globe, and anywhere you see it.
Cartoon, that was. Tel Aviv. Beirut. That is fascinating. I've never seen that before.
The thing that I catch a lot of the kids on that they is they like the fact that it lets them do sports. So if they're a sports fan, they can find commercial broadcast stations that have different sports going on. In different
God sees you, knows you, and deeply loves you. Each song that...
There we have the message for us. Oh, wow.
Discover a new podcast from our library of over 350,000 titles. Here's an iHeartRadio podcast preview.
A Rube Goldberg machine is a device.
My only worry with this, Anthony, is that it really shocked me when a few minutes ago you said that a young person today, a lot of your young people that you show at your radio club, don't know how to tune a radio.
Yeah, so this is what I take them out to the web SDR, and from here they can find any of these different stations, and it'll let them tune amateur and commercial stations. Let's just grab one real quick here. Let's go to the let's take the Northern Utah one. So once you go to these, you can choose different receivers. Some have multiple ones, and this particular one has different bands you can choose, amateur radio bands or commercial bands. And you can tune it by using your mouse. They also have the capability to do filtering, to do different modes. You can also type in a frequency.
Yeah. I think I might be wrong. I think many of the people watching this will be familiar with the web SDR.
Yes.
But again, it's just, I mean, my worry again, they have a great use. In fact, we had recently we were at the Science Festival in Norwich, our nearest city, and we tried it last year being there, and we just couldn't receive anything inside this big modern building. It was just full of electrical noise of all sorts, so we couldn't do it. So we did, web SDR was our friend because we had internet. But it now, and when we, as in we radio amateurs, understand the technology behind radio, we kind of just, we know how web SDR works, and it just transmits, there's a receiver somewhere else, and it just transmits the signal down the internet. My worry with that, and maybe I was, I'm guilty of not thinking about it from particularly a young person's point of view, is does this sterilize it kind of thing and make it just...
It does, unfortunately, a little bit. It does sterilize it. So it is fun to get that hands-on radio with no internet, hand on the tuner. So we do that also. But again, as you said, a lot of times I'm running into a situation, I'll be working with 75 school children and I need some projects that they can do individually. I don't have 75 shortwave radios I can hand out, but I can get them all using their devices and tuning with SDR. So I love them all.
But we mustn't lose sight of the basics of how it works, must we? Yes. In fact, at this I couldn't show it there because it didn't work last year because of the noise. But when we go to our school to do the science day, which was a few weeks later in here, then I do rather boringly every year show a crystal set because it's the basic elements. It's so simple, and it's very hard to impress the average youngster nowadays with technology because they have these wonderful, they have these and they can do so much with it, or apparently they can. Of course, lots of it is remote, but nevertheless, that to them is their their world is everything on there. So to take them to the basics of making a coil and using a germanium diode and a long bit of wire out the window and a connection to the earth, and just showing them that you can actually make a radio receiver that way, it does still impress them actually. I normally sell it on the point of like if you were stuck on a desert island and you had no batteries and you had no power or anything, but you happen to have these few components around in a little box, you could put this together if you knew how to, and make a radio to find out what's happening in the world. And that's the way I sell it to them, and they really are genuinely interested in it. My worry actually, though, Anthony, on that, I don't want to be a doom monger, but I don't know how long it will be, how much longer they'll be transmitting on AM. So that we've got something to show a crystal set actually working.
Yes, and the whole idea of digital broadcasting takes out the use of of crystals also, because you're not going to be able to get down to that fundamental voice. You can just get the data, and you won't be able to translate it without anything further. So
yeah,
we're doing a little activity in about an hour here actually with our local club. We're doing something. Even adult hams don't always get a chance to play around in tunes, so we're doing something. We're going to have what we're going to call HF radio tryouts. We're bringing in 4 commercial currently available radios, and we're going to do basically a tryout shootout type of thing tonight, where people get a chance to tune them using the club's antenna and just see how all 4 of these different radios work. Because it's still fun to tune the radios.
Yeah, it's still fun, and it does teach them about the basics of it. Even if we lots of us still go on then to use modern, gadgets and web SDRs and things like that to show it. It's been fascinating, Anthony. It really has. It's inspired a lot of thinking. Hopefully, not just with us, but with everybody at home as well. So I think you've really made us think. By the way, Ralph also comes back and says the BBC Empire service started in 1932 on shortwave. And if I may, and I very rarely do this, but a few years ago I made a webinar for the RSGB on the 100th anniversary of the BBC. And I did it because at the time, the BBC obviously a very prolific broadcaster in this country, but most of the things to celebrate 100 years of the BBC were all about the programmes and the content. And I thought that I knew that the BBC had also contributed a lot to the technical advancements of radio and then onto television. So I did a webinar, I presented a webinar on that on tonight at 8. So if anybody's interested in that, you go to the RSGB website, rsgb.org/webinars, and look for the one that's on 100 years of BBC technology. Then you'll find it there if it interests you as well. It's on YouTube, yes, sorry, as Tammy's just pointed out. Anthony, thank you very much indeed. A couple more comments for you before we go. Tony G0MQG says, despite having been licensed for 36 years, I still listen to the broadcast bands using an Eddystone valve receiver. There are still plenty of stations on the shortwave bands, and the internet can be used to help identify them. So there's a great example of how you can bring the technologies together. And Mike G4DYC says, many, many thanks, Anthony, from Mike G4DYC. And thank you again from us. It's been great. Thanks for the last 4 programs that you've done for us. We'll give you a break now, but hopefully we'll see you again.
Well, I will make an offer, though. Again, if any local clubs would like a presentation, I'd be happy to do a presentation for you. Just go to my list at tiny.cc/K8ZT-P, or go to my website, K8ZT.com. Drop me an email. I'd be happy to do a program for your local group.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much. Indeed. Oh, we've got one more comment coming in. Tammy just pointed out. From Rick, M7GMT. We once had an optical telegraph running through Norfolk, Ashwellthorpe Woods. Still bears the scars as trees were cut down to provide a line of sight. There we are, and there's a link on there as well on BATC. So if you're watching on BATC, you'll be able to do that. In fact, we might copy it over as well. And Paul McGee says as well, thanks. This has been one great series over the weeks. Many thanks to Anthony and Dave and Tammy and others that get the programme on the air. How else to finish? I can't. Thank you ever so much again, Anthony. We hope to see you again very soon.
73.
73. Thank you. There we are. Thanks very much to Anthony again for all those weeks of entertainment, really. Today, especially looking back at radio, from an American point of view as well. That is almost it for this NARC Live. As we said earlier on, we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. This coming week in NARC, we've got Sunday at 7 o'clock, the GB2RS News on GB3MB, and then at 7:30 on Monday, the Monday Night Net, also on GB3MB. And next Wednesday, a week from tonight, we'll be at CNS School between 7 and 9:30 for an in-person meeting. Plus, remember, I'll be bringing all those radios of Stuart's, and I'll put a list on the website. And of course, keep in touch with us. Keep sending us your details and your stories and your pictures. We'd love to share them with everybody else. And we'll see you again here at NARC Live in 2 weeks' time. But until then, from Tammy M0TC.
Bye-bye.
And from me, David G7ERP, take care of yourselves. Look after each other. Bye-bye.